The day everything changed for Earth started quietly, almost peacefully. People were busy with their daily routines. Some were heading to work, some were rushing to school, and others were simply enjoying breakfast with their families. No one had any idea that within a few hours, the entire planet would feel a deep sting of shame that would be remembered for years. It all began with a universal broadcast that every planet in the known galaxy was watching. It was the annual gathering where the leaders of different worlds came together to discuss progress, cooperation, and future plans. Earth had been invited. Only a few years earlier, and many still believed humans didn't deserve the invitation. The reason was simple. Earth was young compared to the great civilizations out there. Humans had only recently begun to explore beyond their solar system, while other worlds had mastered interstellar travel centuries ago. Still, Earth sent their representatives with hope. They knew they were not the most advanced, but they believed they had potential. They also believed that the gathering was a place for unity, not mockery. They believed wrong. When the Emperor of the strongest interstellar alliance took the stage, a heavy silence fell across the hall. He was a towering figure, known for his authority and confidence. His empire controlled dozens of star systems, and his word held more weight than anyone else's. When he spoke, even the oldest civilizations listened. He started his speech like usual, firm, commanding, and filled with pride about his empire's achievements. But then, unexpectedly, he shifted his attention toward Earth. At first, people thought he would welcome the planet into the fold or offer guidance. But instead, he smirked. And what came out of his mouth next shocked everyone, especially the humans watching from across the galaxy. He said that Earth was nothing but a tiny blue dot pretending to play a big role. He said humans were too slow, too inexperienced, and too emotional to stand beside the great worlds of the galaxy. He mocked the way humans still struggled with basic unity among themselves. He laughed about their technology, calling it childish compared to the advanced machines used by other civilizations. He even said Earth was invited only as a gesture of pity. The crowd reacted with murmurs. Some leaders looked uncomfortable. Others tried to hide their amusement, and a few even chuckled openly. Cameras captured everything, broadcasting it to every corner of the galaxy. On Earth, people stopped what they were doing. They stared at their screens, phones, televisions, holographic displays, frozen in disbelief. The Emperor's words were sharp, cutting deeper than anyone expected. The humiliation spread like wildfire. People felt something heavy in their chest, something painful and angering at the same time. Students in schools whispered about it. Workers paused in factories, unable to focus. Scientists in labs stared blankly at their monitors, feeling small. Families at home felt embarrassed, even though they had done nothing wrong. It wasn't just an insult toward the leaders of Earth. It was an insult toward every human alive. Earth's representatives at the gathering sat still, holding their calm even though their hearts were burning. They wanted to respond. They wanted to defend humanity. But they knew one wrong word could be seen as aggression. Earth couldn't afford unnecessary conflict. So they stayed silent, their faces steady, even as the Emperor continued his disrespect. The speeches ended, but the damage was done. Reporters from across the galaxy rushed to share the story. Headlines appeared everywhere. Some defended Earth, saying the Emperor went too far. Others repeated his words, adding their own mocking comments. Social media platforms across the galaxy exploded with reactions. Some people treated Earth like a joke, while others expressed sympathy. Humanity had never felt this embarrassed on such a massive scale. The humiliation wasn't just personal, it was universal. People felt helpless. They wondered if the Emperor was right. Were they too weak? Too slow? Too new to this galactic community? Earth's governments held emergency meetings. Screens lit up around the world as leaders discussed how to respond. Everyone agreed on one thing: they could not react with anger. They could not reply with threats. They had to stay calm, no matter how deep the insult went. But silence also felt like surrender, and no one wanted humanity to appear afraid. Outside the political halls, the reactions were mixed. Some young people were angry and wanted Earth to cut ties with the Empire. Others felt sad and demoralized. Some were silent, trying to process what it meant for Earth's future. But deep within this pain, something unexpected began to form. A quiet determination. People started talking about working harder, being better, advancing further. They wanted to prove that Earth was more than what the Emperor said. They wanted to show that humanity had value, spirit, and potential. It wasn't about revenge, it was about self-respect. If they couldn't convince others to see their worth, they would make their worth impossible to ignore out in a small scientific facility located far from the big cities. A group of researchers watched the broadcast in silence. They weren't famous, they weren't powerful, and they weren't even well-funded. But they had been working tirelessly on a secret project for years. A breakthrough that, if completed, could change not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. When the broadcast ended, they didn't talk. They didn't shout. They didn't complain. They simply looked at each other, feeling the same fire inside them. The Emperor's insult didn't crush them. It fueled them. One of the senior researchers finally broke the silence. He said that maybe this humiliation came at the right time. Maybe Earth needed this push. Maybe the world needed to be reminded of how far it could go. The others nodded. They all understood what needed to be done. They had to finish their project, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Meanwhile, across the planet, ordinary people went back to their routines, but nothing felt the same. Conversations in homes, offices, parks, and transports all revolved around the Emperor's words. Some tried to laugh it off. Some pretended it didn't hurt. But deep inside, everyone felt the same unresolved tension. Even children, who usually didn't care about political speeches or interstellar gatherings, sensed the shift. They heard the hurt in their parents' voices. They felt the heaviness in the air. Many couldn't understand why someone so powerful would insult their entire world. Their innocent questions made the adults emotional, reminding them of the responsibility they held for future generations. Night fell, but the humiliation didn't fade. Earth glowed quietly from space, unaware of how small or large it looked from afar. But inside that glowing sphere lived billions of people who loved, struggled, dreamed, and hoped. And that hope, surprisingly, didn't break. Even though the Emperor had tried to make Earth look insignificant, humans began to realize something important. The world didn't need the galaxy's approval to grow. They didn't need permission to dream bigger. They just needed the courage to keep going. The insult had wounded them, but it also woke them up. It made them remember who they were. A species that had climbed from caves to cities, from the ground to the skies, and now from the skies to the stars. They weren't perfect, but they had heart. They had resilience. And sometimes that mattered more than advanced technology. While the Emperor celebrated his speech, believing he had put Earth in its place, millions of humans were quietly making a silent promise to themselves. They would rise. They would advance. They would grow. And someday, the galaxy would see them not as a weak world trying to fit in, but as a strong one standing proudly among the stars. Not no shouting, no anger, no threats, just determination. Quiet, powerful determination. And this was only the beginning. Earth had been humiliated, yes, but the story was far from over. The galaxy had no idea what humanity was capable of, and soon they would learn. After the humiliation Earth faced, the world felt shaken but strangely awake. The insult from the Emperor replayed in people's minds again and again, like a bad memory they couldn't erase. But instead of breaking, humanity began to quietly push forward, as if something deep inside them refused to give up. And while most of the galaxy believed Earth would shrink back in shame, something entirely different started happening behind closed doors, not far away from busy cities. In a quiet region surrounded by hills and long stretches of empty land, stood a research facility that didn't look like much from the outside. Its walls were old, its equipment wasn't the latest model, and its staff was far smaller than the big institutes seen on the galactic news channels. If someone passed by, they would assume the place held nothing of importance. But inside those walls, something extraordinary was being created. The team working there had been together for years. They knew each other's routines, strengths, and weaknesses. They weren't rich, and they definitely weren't famous. Most people didn't even know their faces. But they shared a dream to build something that could take humanity one big step forward, something that would prove Earth wasn't as weak as others thought. Their project had no official name. They simply called it the device. It wasn't a weapon, and it wasn't meant to scare others. It was a peaceful invention, one that could change the way energy was used, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. It focused on pure, clean energy, something strong, stable, and almost endless. If it worked, it could power cities for centuries, fuel ships across galaxies, and help planets facing energy shortages. But most importantly, it would show that humans could create something groundbreaking on their own. The day after the Emperor's speech, the mood inside the facility was different. Usually, the team worked with quiet focus, exchanging short comments only when necessary. But that morning, something new hung in the air: extra pressure, extra fire, and a shared sense of purpose that had suddenly doubled. Everyone arrived earlier than usual. No one needed to say why. They all carried the same thought, that Earth needed something to lift its head again. They wanted to contribute in the small but meaningful way they could. Their work suddenly felt bigger than science. It felt like responsibility. In one of the labs, a young researcher adjusted a lens on a machine that had been giving them trouble for months. He stared at the readings, his eyebrows tight with concentration. Before the broadcast, he might have taken a break or moved on to another task. But now he pushed harder. He wanted this machine to work. He wanted the device to reach completion. Every time he remembered the Emperor's mocking laughter, his hands steadied with determination. Just outside that lab, another member of the team worked on the energy chamber. This part of the project had caused him so many sleepless nights. It was delicate, sensitive, and easily unstable. But she didn't back away from it. She had watched the Emperor's speech with her family the night before. Her younger siblings had asked her why he hated Earth so much. She didn't have an answer. But she remembered how their eyes looked when they asked that question, confused, hurt, unsure. Those eyes stayed with her now. They made her work with more patience than ever before. The head of the facility, an older man with gentle eyes and a calm voice, walked through the halls slowly, checking every station. He didn't rush anyone. He didn't pressure them. He simply watched, guiding them when needed, supporting them when they struggled. He understood that science wasn't just formulas and machines. It was emotion, persistence, and belief. And today, belief was stronger than ever. He stopped by every workstation, offering a few quiet words like, "Take your time," or "You're getting closer." His voice carried warmth, the kind that made people feel like their effort mattered. And it did now more than ever. Outside the facility, the world was buzzing with reactions to the Emperor's insult. News channels kept replaying the clip. Some anchors talked about how Earth needed to stay strong. Others worried about how the humiliation would affect Earth's relationships with other planets. People argued online, blaming different leaders, discussing whether Earth should leave the interstellar alliance or stay and prove itself. There were debates, discussions, and frustration everywhere. But in that quiet research facility, there were no arguments, no anger, no loud voices. There was only focus. The team knew they couldn't change what happened, but they could change what came next. As the hours passed, progress slowly began to appear. Tiny improvements, small breakthroughs, nothing big enough to announce yet, but enough to keep hope alive. Every time a reading stabilized or a machine responded correctly, their hearts lifted a little. At one point, while adjusting a power module, one of the engineers sighed deeply. The head of the facility walked over and gently asked if everything was all right. The engineer nodded slowly, but admitted he felt pressure like never before. He felt that the whole world was depending on them. The head of the facility smiled softly and said, "Earth isn't depending on us. It's trusting us." That's a big difference. Those words eased the tension. The team wasn't carrying a burden. They were carrying hope. Meanwhile, people around the world were quietly starting to work harder in their own ways too. Office workers pushed to finish tasks with extra care. Students studied longer. Inventors scribbled new ideas. Even artists created paintings and songs expressing humanity's spirit and strength. Everyone felt this shared desire to rise above the insult. It was as if the humiliation had connected humans in a way nothing else had done in years. In schools, teachers explained the situation to students, trying to keep their tone calm and encouraging. They told them that Earth wasn't defined by one person's opinions. They told them that every great civilization in history had been underestimated at some point. They reminded them that progress often begins when someone tells you you're not good enough. Inside homes, families discussed what the future might hold. Some talked about how humans had always faced challenges, wars, disasters, hardships, and had overcome them again and again. Parents reminded their children that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet decision to keep going. Back at the research facility, sunset turned the sky orange through the windows. But no one was ready to leave. They kept working late into the evening. They shared simple meals, sitting on stools and boxes, talking about ideas, solutions, and possibilities. Even their tiredness didn't stop them. Because their hearts were too full of purpose. At one point, the device flickered to life for a moment, just a second, just a glow. But it was enough to send a wave of excitement through the team. They gathered around it, watching the faint shimmer fade. They exchanged hopeful glances. They weren't there yet, but that brief moment told them something very important. They were on the right path. As night fell completely, the world outside grew quiet. But inside the facility, lights stayed on. Machines hummed softly. Hands kept working. Minds kept thinking. The humiliation from the Emperor didn't crush them. It pushed them into action. And while the galaxy continued to underestimate Earth, while other planets whispered about how weak humans were, this small team was building something that would one day silence every doubt. They didn't do it for revenge. They didn't do it to embarrass anyone. They did it because they believed in humanity's potential. They believed in Earth's future. They believed that humans, despite their flaws, were capable of greatness. No one outside knew what was happening inside that facility. No one knew how close they were to changing everything. But that was the beauty of it. The world didn't need to see their progress yet. It just needed to trust that humans could rise, even after being pushed down. And they would. The device was still incomplete, but the spark inside the team had fully ignited. Their determination was stronger than materials, stronger than machines, stronger than any insult. Earth was humiliated, yes. But something new was growing quietly beneath that pain, something powerful, something inspiring, something unstoppable. And soon the galaxy would feel it. In the weeks that followed the Emperor's insult, Earth slowly returned to its routines on the surface, but something deeper had changed inside people. Every person carried a quiet memory of that moment, a memory that pushed them to try a little harder in their daily lives. Even though the world still felt the weight of humiliation, there was a strange strength rising underneath it, slow, silent, but real. Meanwhile, the research facility working on the device continued its efforts with relentless focus. Every day, small improvements were made. Every error, every setback, every unstable test only made the team more determined to find the solution. They weren't doing this for fame or credit. They were doing it because humanity needed to win something to remind them that Earth had a future brighter than the shame that had been thrown at them. And while the team worked in secrecy, the galaxy was starting to sense something strange happening around Earth. It began with a group of observers from a nearby planet. They noticed faint movements in the gravitational field surrounding Earth's small ripples, barely noticeable at first, but consistent. They sent a report to their own leaders, who forwarded it to the Interstellar Alliance. It didn't take long before curious scientists from different worlds started scanning Earth for unusual activity. At first, they found nothing alarming, but the readings kept repeating. Something powerful was forming, something the galaxy hadn't seen before. And the most surprising part was that Earth wasn't saying anything about it. No announcement, no warning, no bragging. Just silence. News channels across different planets began discussing theories. Some analysts believed Earth was experimenting with a new kind of spacecraft. Others thought the gravitational shifts were natural phenomena. A few even suggested that Earth might be imitating technology from advanced civilizations, trying to catch up. But no one could confirm anything. On Earth, people started hearing rumors from off-world news sources. Some were excited, some were nervous, and some didn't know what to believe. But the idea that Earth might be working on something new made people stand a little taller. It didn't erase the hurt from the Emperor's words, but it brought a hint of pride back into the air. In the research facility, the team wasn't aware of the galaxy's growing curiosity. They were too focused on narrowing down the final issues with the device. The machine was stable for longer periods now, glowing with a steady light that made the team hopeful. But they were still careful. The smallest mistake could undo everything. One evening, as the sky outside was turning dark, the energy chamber activated for almost a full minute. The entire room filled with a soft, shimmering brightness. The team froze, watching with wide eyes. It wasn't the final version, but it was the longest and most stable activation they had achieved so far. A young researcher pressed a hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat race. "We're close," he whispered, not even realizing he spoke out loud. The head of the facility nodded quietly. "Closer than anyone thinks." The moment brought relief and excitement, but also responsibility. The team knew they were creating something that could change the galaxy. They had to handle it with care, humility, and patience. Meanwhile, Earth continued living under the shadow of the Emperor's insult, unaware that its biggest breakthrough was only days away. Across the galaxy, however, the whispers grew louder. Some planets began to wonder whether Earth had finally decided to push forward despite the humiliation. Others questioned whether the Emperor had made a mistake when he mocked humanity. Slowly, doubt began spreading not about Earth, but about him. Inside the Emperor's palace, advisors started receiving reports about the gravitational anomalies around Earth. They passed them on to him during a daily briefing. The Emperor laughed when he heard the first report. He waved his hand dismissively, saying that Earth couldn't possibly create anything advanced. He said humans were probably just fixing old satellites. His advisors nodded, but they exchanged glances. Something in the reports felt unusual, too organized, too consistent. But they didn't dare argue with him. Back on Earth, life went on, but the feeling of change grew slightly day by day. People didn't know the details, but they sensed something rising. And even though they couldn't see the device, They felt its impact through the small shifts happening in their own hearts. The team in the research facility worked day and night. Their eyes were tired, their hands sometimes shaky, but their spirits stayed strong. The device wasn't just a scientific invention anymore. It had become a symbol one that could help Earth stand again with dignity. During one late-night session, a small malfunction shook the chamber slightly. Sparks flew for a moment before the machine quieted again. Instead of panicking, the team calmly stepped to their stations and analyzed what had gone wrong. They had grown used to challenges. Giving up wasn't an option. One of the team members sighed and wiped sweat off her forehead. "If only the galaxy knew how hard we're trying," she said with a tired smile. The head of the facility looked up at her. "One day they will. And when that day comes, we won't need to explain anything. Our work will speak for itself." Those words stayed with the team for the rest of the night. Every hum of the machines, every flicker of light, every adjustment they made felt like a step towards something extraordinary. As the days passed, the gravitational anomalies increased slightly. Space monitoring stations from distant planets began reporting the same pattern. Scientists everywhere were confused. Their scanners showed that something powerful was forming around Earth, a kind of energy unlike the ones commonly used in the galaxy. The galaxy had no idea that this energy wasn't a weapon, or a shield, or a military threat. It was simply the result of humanity striving to prove its worth, not through war, not through aggression, but through innovation. More planets began discussing the situation openly. Some defended Earth, saying humans were allowed to progress. Others grew suspicious, believing Earth might be planning something hidden. And some feared the Emperor had pushed Earth too far, and that the consequences might return to him. The Emperor, meanwhile, continued to ignore the warnings. He believed humans were too weak to rise. He believed his words had crushed them completely. He believed Earth would remain a quiet, insignificant planet, just trying to survive among giants. He didn't realize that giants sometimes fall to those they underestimate. On Earth, the research facility finally reached a point where the device was nearly complete. The team could feel it in their bones. Every test brought them closer. Every reading became clearer. The machine hummed with a confidence it didn't have before. During a late-night session, as the rest of the world slept, the team gathered around the device to run a major test. The room was filled with a tense silence. The head of the facility looked around at the tired but hopeful faces of his team and said softly, "No matter how this test goes, remember something. You've already changed Earth. You've already given people hope." The test began. The energy chamber lit up, slowly at first, and brighter and steadier. Readings on the screens stabilized one by one. The floor vibrated gently, but not dangerously. The team watched every number, every graph, every flicker of light with their hearts racing. And then, for the first time, the device held steady for several minutes longer than any test before. A soft wave of warmth spread through the room, gentle as sunlight. No one spoke for several seconds. It was as if the entire facility held its breath. Then, one by one, smiles formed. Tired, emotional, relieved smiles. The test ended safely. The energy faded, but the achievement remained. They weren't fully done yet, but they were close, so close that success felt within reach. And while the galaxy continued whispering and guessing, humanity had already taken its first real step toward proving its worth. The gravitational anomalies kept spreading, growing stronger and more noticeable. More planets kept talking about Earth. More scientists kept scanning it. More rumors kept stirring. No one realized that Earth's quiet progress was about to become a turning point in galactic history. The world that had been mocked, belittled, and humiliated was rising not with noise, not with threats, but with quiet strength. And soon, the Emperor who had laughed at Earth would begin to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The day Earth chose to reveal its breakthrough began like any other. People woke up, prepared for work, checked the news, and carried the same quiet weight they had been carrying for weeks. The Emperor's insult still lived somewhere in the back of everyone's mind, but life had moved forward. Humans had grown used to disappointment and pressure, but this time they were handling it differently. Instead of shrinking away, they were waiting for something they didn't fully understand yet. Meanwhile, at the research facility, the team stood in front of their completed device, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear. It had taken years of patience, countless mistakes, endless nights, and a deep belief that Earth could be more than the galaxy thought of it. Now the results of all that work stood glowing softly before them. The head of the facility watched the team with calm eyes. He could see the exhaustion on their faces, the way their shoulders slumped slightly, the faint shadows beneath their eyes, the way some of them kept rubbing their fingers nervously. They were tired, but they were also ready. "Today is not about showing off," he said gently. "Today is about showing who we are." No one said anything in response, but the message settled inside them. Earth didn't want revenge. Earth didn't want conflict. Earth wanted dignity. A quiet, alert tone echoed through the building as Earth's leadership contacted the facility. The time had come. The Universal Summit was about to begin. Across the galaxy, dozens of major planets, alliances, councils, and independent groups were gathering for the event. Representatives arrived in large halls built from glowing materials, smooth metal, or crystal-like walls, depending on their world's culture. The summit was meant to discuss major issues: trade, science, diplomacy, energy shortages, peace agreements. Whenever the summit happened, it felt like the galaxy holding its breath, hoping for unity. But this time, something different hung in the air. Everyone had heard rumors about the strange gravitational shifts around Earth. No one knew what was happening on the small blue planet, but curiosity spread like wildfire. Even the Emperor attended, sitting on his raised seat at the center, chin lifted high, wearing the same air of superiority as always. He entered the hall with a confident stride, pretending not to care about the rumors or the worried whispers behind him. He believed Earth had nothing powerful to offer. He believed today would be like every other summit, where advanced planets discussed important matters, while Earth quietly listened from the back. But today, Earth wasn't planning to sit in the back. When Earth's representatives entered the summit hall, they walked with calm steps. They wore simple clothing, not heavy armor or fancy fabrics like the others. But there was something new in their eyes, a quiet resolve the galaxy had never seen before. The hall grew slightly quieter. The Emperor glanced at them, amused. He seemed ready to mock them again. But Earth did not look at him. They walked straight ahead, carrying a small, secure case containing the device's compact demonstration unit. It wasn't the full machine, just a sample to show what it could do. When the summit began, different planets spoke about their concerns. Some talked about trade routes. Others discussed environmental issues. A few mentioned increasing energy shortages across the galaxy. The Emperor spoke with his usual confidence, acting as though his words shaped the future. And then it was Earth's turn. A hush fell over the hall. Normally, no one paid much attention when Earth representatives spoke, but today, everyone leaned forward just a little. The lead representative stepped up to the center of the hall and paused for a moment. Not because of fear, because of the importance of what was about to happen. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't attempt to sound powerful. He spoke in a tone so simple and sincere that the words carried farther than a shout ever could. Earth has been quiet for a long time. We have listened. We have learned. We have grown. And today, we want to share something with all of you, not as a challenge, not as revenge, but as a step forward for everyone. A few delegates exchanged curious glances. The representative opened the small case slowly. Inside lay a smooth, silver-like object that pulsed with a soft white glow. The light wasn't harsh. It was warm, almost comforting, like the first light of morning. "This is an energy core," the representative explained. "Created entirely on Earth. It produces clean, stable energy without harming any environment and without needing rare materials. If used correctly, it can power cities, ships, and colonies for centuries." The hall remained silent. He continued speaking, his voice steady. "We built it quietly, not to impress anyone, but to solve our own problems. But after the recent events, after being underestimated, we realized something important. Innovation is not about pride. It is about purpose. And we want this technology to help the galaxy, not divide it." A soft ripple of shock swept through the hall. To give something so powerful away freely was unheard of. Most worlds guarded their major technologies closely, using them as bargaining tools or political leverage. But Earth was offering something extraordinary with open hands. The representative placed the energy core on the display stand. The glow grew brighter, filling the room with a calm, steady light. The Emperor's expression shifted. For the first time, the confidence on his face cracked slightly. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, trying to understand what he was seeing. He opened his mouth as if to say something dismissive, but no words came out. One of his advisors whispered urgently to him, "The readings, they're real." Around the hall, different species began studying the core. Some scanned it with small devices. Others simply stared, amazed. A few murmured quietly, admitting they had never seen anything like it. Earth's representative spoke again. "We do not want to start a new era of competition. We want to start an era of cooperation. This technology is not a threat. It is an opportunity for everyone." The hall filled with whispers. Even planets far more advanced than Earth stared at the energy core with genuine respect. It wasn't just powerful. It was peaceful. It didn't radiate danger. It radiated possibility. One delegate finally stood up and asked, "How did Earth create this?" The representative smiled gently. "With hard work, patience, and the belief that even small worlds can do something big." There was no arrogance in his words. No pride, just truth. Another delegate asked, "Why reveal it now?" The representative paused before answering. "Because we want the galaxy to see humanity at its best, not at its lowest." The Emperor stiffened at those words. He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. His earlier insult now felt heavier in the room, echoing silently, even though no one repeated it. Slowly, different worlds began approaching Earth's representatives, asking to learn more. They talked about collaborations, partnerships, future projects, and ways the new energy could help planets struggling with shortages. For the first time in its history, Earth was not just included in the conversation, it was leading it. And yet, Earth's representatives remained humble. They didn't brag. They didn't blame anyone. They didn't speak of the Emperor at all. Their calm grace made the breakthrough even more powerful. The Emperor watched all of this unfold with growing tension. He tried to maintain his proud posture, but it became harder as each delegate looked away from him and toward Earth. The more Earth spoke with kindness and clarity, the smaller the Emperor seemed. He had mocked them. He had humiliated them. He had dismissed them in front of the entire galaxy. And now the world he insulted was quietly earning the respect he thought belonged only to him. The shift was gentle but unmistakable. In that hall, reputation and influence began changing direction. By the end of the summit, everyone understood one thing. Earth hadn't risen through strength or force. It had risen through dignity, patience, and innovation. And while Earth did not say a single word about forgiveness or apology, the message was clear. They didn't need revenge. They didn't need to prove the Emperor wrong through insults. They had proven him wrong through progress. As the summit ended and the hall slowly emptied, the Emperor remained seated for a long time, staring at the energy core with a troubled expression. His advisors stood around him quietly, waiting for him to speak. But he said nothing, because deep inside, he already knew the truth. It was no longer the galaxy humiliating Earth. It was Earth, simply by being better, that had humbled him. Part 5 began with a strange, heavy silence spreading across the galaxy. For months, the Emperor had ruled with complete confidence, believing that his voice was the strongest and that no one would ever dare question him. But everything changed the day Earth revealed its quiet breakthrough. Since then, the Emperor's world had slowly started to crumble, not because of war or rebellion, but because of embarrassment. His arrogance had finally caught up with him. Across his grand palace, the hallways that once echoed with praise now felt colder. Advisors who used to rush toward him with respect had turned distant. They spoke less, and when they did, their tones lacked the excitement they once carried. His empire was still powerful, but something important was slipping through his fingers' trust. The Emperor often walked through the long, glass corridors alone, staring out at the glowing planets circling far below. He felt a pressure in his chest that he had never recognized before. It wasn't fear of attack. It was fear of losing relevance. For the first time, he realized that other worlds were turning away from him. Some of his strongest allies had begun sending secret messages to Earth, asking for cooperation and guidance about the new technology. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit. One quiet morning, he gathered his council in the main chamber. Usually, people sat up straight during his meetings, trying to impress him with brilliant ideas. But today, they sat calmly, without the nervous energy he expected. It was almost as if they were no longer afraid of disappointing him. That alone shook him. He cleared his throat, trying to sound powerful. The situation with Earth, he began, choosing his words carefully, is being blown out of proportion. Surely Earth's invention is useful, but it does not change the balance of power that much. The council remained silent. Not one advisor, a calm-faced elder with silver lines on his robe, slowly lifted his eyes. With respect, Emperor, the balance has already changed. The Emperor's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that. Another advisor added. Earth is receiving invitations from planets that used to depend on us. They are not looking at Earth as a weak world anymore. They see opportunity. They see leadership. The Emperor felt heat rush into his face, but he kept his expression steady. Then we will remind the galaxy who leads. No, the elder advisor said softly. That will only make you look insecure. Those words sliced through the Emperor more deeply than he expected. Insecure? Him? The one who ruled an entire alliance? The one who once made the galaxy tremble with a single command? He dismissed the meeting, but their calm voices echoed in his mind all day. By afternoon, he could no longer sit still. He walked through the grand balcony that overlooked his capital city. Down below, lights flickered like tiny stars, and the air shimmered with quiet movement of ships leaving and arriving. It should have comforted him. Instead, it reminded him how fast things were changing. A soft knock sounded behind him. His assistant entered with a tablet in hand. New diplomatic reports, the assistant said quietly. The Emperor turned toward him. What now? 3 more planets have shifted their trade agreements. To Earth. The Emperor's breath grew sharp. Earth? Again? Yes, the assistant replied, eyes lowering. They trust Earth's new energy technology. It's efficient. It's safe. And Earth is willing to share it without demanding control. That last part hit him hardest. he suddenly realized how different Earth's approach was from his own empire. For years, he believed greatness came from strength, from power, from showing others their place. He had mocked Earth because he thought humility was weakness. Now he could see it clearly. Humility was the very thing that was winning people over. He dismissed the assistant and sank into his chair. His thoughts swirled in circles, pulling him deeper into a feeling he couldn't name. That night, he barely slept when morning arrived. The situation was worse. A broadcast spread across the galaxy from one of the largest neutral worlds. Their leader spoke calmly but firmly, stating that Earth had proven itself worthy of respect and that the galaxy needed cooperation, not arrogance from those in power. Although the leader did not mention the Emperor directly, everyone understood the message. The Emperor sat alone in his chamber, watching the broadcast. His palms slowly closed into fists. He wanted to be angry, but something inside him finally cracked open. He could no longer deny the truth. The galaxy wasn't humiliating him. He had humiliated himself. Later that day, he attended another council meeting, but this time his voice lacked the force it usually carried. He spoke slower, as if weighing every word more carefully than ever before. "We must reconsider our relationship with Earth," he said quietly. The council members exchanged surprised glances. It was the first time the Emperor had ever suggested bending, even slightly. One advisor leaned forward. "What do you propose?" The Emperor hesitated, feeling the weight of pride pressing heavily against his chest. Admitting mistake was not something he had ever practiced. But he also knew that holding on to pride now would only destroy him further. "We request a meeting," he said. "A private discussion with Earth's leaders." The room went silent, but this time not out of fear. It was a different type of silence, one that held a strange mix of shock and relief. One advisor spoke carefully. "Will you go in strength or peace?" The Emperor looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly. "Peace," he said. "This time, peace." That single word felt like a stone rolling off a mountain. Once spoken, everything began shifting. Within hours, messages were sent out. Earth received the request. Days passed with no answer, and each day felt longer than the last. The Emperor checked his communicator more often than he ever thought possible. His council remained patient, but he could feel their hidden curiosity. Was Earth willing to listen? Finally, Earth replied, "Yes, we will meet." The Emperor exhaled with relief he didn't even realize he was holding. But the relief was mixed with something unsettling. He wondered what Earth thought of him now. Did they see him as a fool? A bully? Someone who deserved humiliation in return? The day of the meeting approached, and the Emperor prepared more carefully than he ever had. His ceremonial armor remained untouched. He chose simple robes instead. His guards offered to escort him with full detail, but he refused. "Not this time," he said. "I must show them I come without force." Meanwhile, the galaxy watched in anticipation. For the first time in history, the Emperor was traveling not to command, not to demand, but to listen. When he arrived at the neutral space station, where the meeting would take place, he felt smaller than he expected. The hallway leading to the conference room was quiet. No trumpets. No cheering crowds. Only silence and soft lights guiding the path. As he walked, every step felt like a reminder of his past mistakes. He remembered the day he had mocked Earth, calling it insignificant. He remembered the laughs from his council. He remembered the confidence he had once carried like a cloak. All of that felt distant now, like it belonged to a different man. At the door of the meeting room, he paused. For a moment, he considered turning back. But then he thought about everything he had lost: respect, trust, influence, and he forced himself to step inside. Inside, Earth's representatives stood calmly, waiting. Their expressions were neutral, not angry, not mocking. They simply waited. The Emperor realized then that he no longer held the power in this room. He wasn't here to negotiate as an equal. He was here to admit something he had never admitted before. He stared at them for a long moment, the words forming slowly in his mind. His voice finally emerged, softer than anyone had ever heard from him. I was wrong. The room remained silent. The Earth representatives watched him with calm eyes, giving him space to continue. He swallowed hard, feeling the last guard of his pride fall away. I underestimated your world. I misjudged your people, and I let my pride blind me. For that, I ask forgiveness. The moment those words left his mouth, it felt as if the entire galaxy shifted, as if the universe had been holding its breath just to hear those words spoken. He lowered his head, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. This was the moment Earth had waited for. This was the moment the galaxy never imagined would happen. The Emperor, once proud and arrogant, now stood humbled, and the true weight of Part 5 settled in. Not the fall of a leader, but the quiet rise of humanity, achieved not through force, but through patience, dignity, and a refusal to answer insult with insult. Part 6 began with a silence so deep that everyone inside the meeting room felt it press gently against them. Even the machines that hummed softly in the background seemed to quiet down as the Emperor lowered his head. For a moment, time itself felt slower, like the entire universe was watching what would happen next. The Earth representatives stood still, their hands folded calmly. They had expected a conversation, maybe questions, maybe a request for cooperation. But they had not expected the Emperor to actually bow his head with such sincerity. It was not the behavior of a ruler pretending to show humility. It was the behavior of someone who finally understood the weight of HFY, his own pride. The air felt almost fragile. The Emperor slowly lifted his gaze. His eyes looked tired, more tired than any leader of a galaxy should look. But there was also something else there, something almost gentle. A realization, perhaps. A recognition of how wrong he had been. I have led by strength for many years, he said quietly, the words almost catching in his throat. I believe that power was measured by how loudly you speak, or how many worlds obey you. But today, standing here, I understand that real strength is something different. He paused. No one interrupted him. It is the ability to accept mistakes, he continued. It is the ability to learn. And it is the courage to admit when someone you once looked down on has surpassed you. The Earth delegation exchanged small, thoughtful glances. They had not come to this meeting to embarrass him or demand anything. They had come to build understanding. And now, with the Emperor speaking from a place of sincerity, they felt a sense of responsibility to handle the moment with care. One representative finally stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady, and warm. You are here in peace, and we respect that. We do not wish to use this moment to shame you, Emperor. The galaxy needs peace, cooperation, and trust more than anything. The Emperor listened closely. Every word mattered. The representative continued. Yes, your words in the past hurt many people, but Earth is not guided by revenge. What we want is fairness. What we want is respect. And what we want is a future where no world feels small or unimportant. The Emperor took a slow breath. It felt like fresh air after years of suffocating under the weight of his own pride. And you will have my respect, he answered. From this moment on. Another Earth delegate spoke up, her voice gentle. We accept your apology, but what comes next is more important than the apology itself. Words matter, but actions matter more. The Emperor nodded. He knew she was right. Apologies were only the beginning. What would shape the future was how he behaved from this point forward. I wish to work with Earth, he said slowly, not as a ruler demanding cooperation, but as a partner seeking to understand. That sentence carried a kind of power that no command or threat had ever carried from him. It was honest. It was human. And for the first time, he sounded like someone who understood what true leadership really meant. A soft sense of relief passed through the room, warm like sunlight breaking through clouds. The meeting continued, gentle and thoughtful, with everyone speaking openly. Earth explained their energy technology, how it could stabilize weaker planets, reduce resource struggles, and create cleaner, safer systems across the galaxy. The Emperor listened carefully, asking questions in a tone that was humble rather than commanding. Each minute that passed seemed to ease the tension in his shoulders. Each answer he received seemed to open his mind a little more. It was as if he had finally stepped into a new chapter of his life, one that he should have entered long ago. After several discussions, the meeting moved into a broader hall where leaders from other worlds had gathered. They had been watching everything through live feeds, waiting to see how the Emperor would behave. When he entered the hall, the room did not react with fear, nor did it stand in awe. Instead, the leaders waited quietly, curious to see how he would present himself now. The Emperor walked to the center of the hall. His robe shimmered softly under the lights, but he looked smaller than usual. Not weak, just human. He turned to face the assembly. "To the worlds gathered here," he began, "I come today not as the ruler who once spoke loudly and acted out of pride, but as someone who wishes to understand the value of unity." Some representatives leaned forward, watching him closely. "I once humiliated Earth," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I spoke carelessly. I judged without knowing, and I allowed arrogance to guide my actions. I see now how wrong that was. Earth has shown strength, patience, and dignity, something I should have learned long ago." The hall remained silent, but the silence felt respectful. "I asked the galaxy to see Earth not as a world that was once mocked, but as a world that rose through knowledge, not force. A world that responded to insult with grace. A world that deserves a seat among the leaders of peace." A gentle murmur flowed through the crowd. Some nodded. Some exchanged quiet words. But overall, the atmosphere was positive surprisingly. Positive. Then came the moment no one expected, that the Emperor slowly bent down on one knee. Gasps filled the hall. A leader known across hundreds of systems. A man whose pride had once stood taller than any mountain, was kneeling before a planet he once humiliated. But there was nothing showy about the gesture. It was quiet, sincere, almost peaceful. "I kneel," he said softly, "not in defeat, but in respect. I ask Earth for partnership. I ask for forgiveness. And I ask for the chance to learn from them." The Earth representatives felt their hearts tighten. They had never imagined this would happen, and they had no desire to embarrass him further. One of them stepped forward and said, "Rise, Emperor. Humility is not weakness. You have shown great courage today. We stand not above you, but beside you." Slowly, the Emperor stood again. His expression carried relief, gratitude, and something he had never allowed himself to show before humanness. The hall erupted into soft applause. Not loud, not dramatic, but warm, supportive, and genuine. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in the galaxy. In the days that followed, news spread everywhere, not of Earth's triumph over an enemy, but of a moment where pride gave way to understanding. People across planets watched the recordings with surprise, admiration, and hope. The Emperor returned to his palace, but something inside him had changed permanently. His advisors noticed he walked with a different posture, now not stiff with pride, but relaxed with clarity. He listened more. He asked questions. He admitted when he didn't know something. And surprisingly, his council began respecting him more than they had in years. Meanwhile, Earth continued to share its energy technology, forming peaceful alliances and offering help where needed. Humanity became a symbol of patience and wisdom, rising above the insult that once stung the planet so deeply. What made this transformation beautiful was that Earth never sought revenge. It never demanded an apology. It never wished to embarrass the Emperor. It simply stayed focused on growth, unity, and progress. And that choice ended up changing the galaxy more than any threat or attack ever could. Emperor often looked back at the moment he knelt in front of Earth's representatives. It had been his most vulnerable moment, yet also the most freeing. He realized that leadership was not about towering above others, but about walking beside them. And Earth realized something important too, that even someone who once caused them pain could learn, change, and grow, and that giving someone the chance to correct their mistakes can sometimes lead to the greatest peace. The galaxy slowly became a more united place. Trade increased. Resources were shared. Conflicts cooled. And when people talked about the Emperor now, they no longer described him as the arrogant ruler who insulted Earth. They described him as the leader who learned humility, as the person who recognized the true strength of humanity. In the end, Earth stood taller, not because it forced anyone to bow, but because it carried itself with quiet dignity. And the Emperor stood wiser, not because he ruled with fear, but because he learned to lead with understanding. What began as humiliation had transformed into harmony. And the galaxy, watching it all, realized that sometimes the greatest victory is not winning a fight, but choosing peace.